always learning. And then the other program for Elk Grove Adult Ed is over at Rio Consumnes. So I have to go out to the jail, and it's not the best program because we are no longer interacting with the students. So it's all through packets. So it's literally tons of homework assignments
Oh
that
my
we
goodness.
never get to see the students. So I go out, I get their assignments, I grade them, return them, give them new assignments. So
Is this
yeah,
all you do? Just train in different facilities and whatnot?
now I do just training. I was doing managing of janitorial service, but as of January of this year, my role, so I work part for Elk Grove Adult Ed and also part for Integrity Training Services.
Okay.
And there I do customized training programs. So I a lot of what I do is for their janitorial service, but we're
Right.
expanding that to also offer it to other school districts.
Wow. Well, at least it stays all within the same, you know, job site, so to speak.
Yeah,
You know, this
exactly.
training.
Yep. And
They
it'll
don't.
eventually blend together where the program with adult ed is going to be part of the integrity training program where they're going to contract instead of with me as an individual with my
Right.
business.
Oh, yeah, because I was going to ask. I mean, is that? Well, I guess now you're doing it. Considered a conflict of interest since you're,
No,
just
it's kind of blended together and they really melded together really well because for the first 2 years, students who completed my class, not only did they get opportunities to go to work for Elk Grove Adult or Elk Grove School District, but
right.
also uh, I was able to help some with job placement with Integrity Janitorial, the maintenance solutions. And so that was really a nice opportunity for students. And I can
Wow.
still do that. I have that relationship, but we want to expand this to other cleaning services as well, which
Right.
will allow me to help students be able to get job placement.
Wow. Nice. You
Yeah.
definitely are the connection, I guess, huh?
Well, I've been doing this my whole life. And so
Right.
I started on the supply side of the business. I know a lot of distributors, and through that I learned or met a lot of the janitorial services and a lot of the school districts. So I've built some good relationships with them.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
And that's what's neat about this career path is there's so many different ways you can go with it. For me, I did cleaning, but I knew I wanted to kind of grow, and it went into sales for quite a long time, and then from there it went into um, the service side. And so
Right.
it just kind of has allowed me to meander through and find the things that I enjoy about the business and things I don't.
Well, I started thinking about this probably maybe a year ago, a little less. But never thought much about how extensive this is until
Yeah.
this class started.
Well,
This class kind of opened your eyes to a lot of things that I've seen, as the
yep.
janitors would come through the area and whatnot. It's like, wow, you put it all together now in your head about what you're seeing,
Yeah.
what I was seeing at this time.
This industry is a $64 billion industry just on the services side, not even
Wow.
on the chemical supply. Just cleaning services in the United States is $64 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Definitely a job people take for granted, you
Oh,
know.
absolutely. Yeah. Sure. I got people. Tony, is that you on the dial in?
Yeah, apologies. Thanks for giving me the dial-in, by the way. It's been coming in pretty handy. It's driving me crazy at a relatives. I'm kind of, they got their machines all over the house. I'm trying to log in at the guest in tandem.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Trust me, I get it.
yeah. But I appreciate you uploading all that stuff. I mean, as I have the downtime, I'll go through and I'll look at all of those video uploads and everything else that you're putting in there.
Perfect.
Nice.
So we are only missing Robert today. And Christina won't be in here today, but we're missing Robert. So we'll give him a minute and see if everything's right. So everybody have a good weekend. Enjoy the nice weather and good opportunity to work in the yards and do all the fun stuff that we got to do, get projects done. It's supposed to get some good rain this week, so it's nice. It's giving us good breaks. We get some nice spring days, and then we turn around and get some good rain. So. All right. Well, based on the fact we're missing at least 2 people from our groups, I may push off doing the breakout rooms today, just from the concern of they're small breakout rooms anyway. So we may just push that over to Wednesday to go into our breakout rooms. So. Well, we continue on in our discussion. Let's do a few minutes of review before we start today's lesson. And this one is, I'll ask you guys some review questions, just kind of touch base. Do me a favor, raise your hands on this one, if you will. If you remember, raising your hand is if you click on that more button, it should, let's see where the raise your hand feature is on this one. Actually, it's in reactions. I think that's it. So we'll try that, see if that works. But okay, so last week we broke things down into our standard equipment, chemicals, and supplies. And just kind of touching base. Who can help me with some of the key pieces of equipment that we will use in doing hard floor care? Mark, we'll start with you.
All right, equipment, vacuum cleaners, mops, mop heads, dusters, hand dusters, push dusters, mop dusters. As far as equipment goes, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more. Putty knives.
Okay, so we had you hit on a lot of the core. And we think of dusters as dust mops. Okay,
right.
So there's you hit on the mop buckets, the mop handles, the dust mop tools, putty knives. Good on those. That's a good one to always have in case. There's 2 larger pieces of equipment that we can use in hard floor care. Do you guys remember what those were?
The rotaries?
Yep. And there's
pad driver.
What's that?
Was it the pad drivers and the rotary floor machines?
Yeah, so the rotary floor machine and pad driver is part of that. Nelson, you want to help Tony out on that one?
Is it high-speed buffer?
High-speed buffer, and then the rotary that you're referring to might be considered a low-speed, or we could also call it a side-by-side. The reality is high-speed and low-speed are both considered rotary, and rotary can range anywhere in speeds from as low as 150 all the way up to 3,500. So there's a wide variance, but typically we break it into 2 categories. Low speed, which is anywhere from 150 to 350, okay? And those are, generally speaking, the ones that swing side to side. So we can call them a swing buffer a side to side or side by side, actually side to side, um, low speed. So any of those terms would apply. And it's funny, depends on where you're from. You know, I've heard all kinds of different terms for them. Whereas high speed, there's basically the electric, and then there was a type that we didn't talk a lot about, but is used that creates speeds upwards of 2,000 RPMs, an ultra high speed. Remember that machine that we touched on briefly? It was the propane burnisher. So I'll show you a video that includes some information about it. Nelson, go ahead.
Now I was about to say the profane.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just touching base on metal mop buckets. Metal mop buckets. Would you want to use those with acidic cleaners? Why not?
Wouldn't that eat away the metal?
It will, absolutely. Let's see here.
And they leak.
And they leak. Yep, the seams can leak. Absolutely. Yep. Two different. Yes.
For acidic cleaners, can you use the stainless steel mud bucket or?
You can. Good call. If you were using a stainless steel, it does provide corrosion resistance against acidic cleaners. Now, keep in mind, the reality is we don't use acidic cleaners too often. Most of those times, they're used in smaller concentrations for removing of mineral deposits, right? Calcium, rust, things along those lines.
All right.
All right. A lot of times, like toilet bowl cleaners are acid cleaners. All right. So that was a lot of the core things I wanted to touch base on. Now, just briefly about our chemicals that we would use. In our chemical systems that we might use, what is the most common cleaner we would use? We touched on this about our general cleaners. Ken.
Neutral or multi-purpose?
Neutral cleaner, absolutely. Yep. Because a neutral cleaner won't harm the floor finishes or coatings. It won't cause damage to a wood floor coating. It won't damage the concrete if we're using it on a polished concrete floor. So just about all manufacturers of flooring recommend the use of neutral cleaners. One other thing I did not mention, but I want to take this time to address. We talked a little bit about it in the chemical portion. The use of cold water over hot water. Although hot water does increase some of the cleaning efficiency, there's some real arguments in the industry about this. Most of the time, we want to use cool or lukewarm water at the most. And the reason being is for safety. Okay. If we use too hot of water, it can damage floors, especially floor finishes. And also, it creates more volatile organic compounds or VOCs. Because what happens is when you get chemicals hot, right, we start to get more fumes off of that. And that will cause more respiratory issues. Those issues are resolved by using cool or lukewarm water. All right. And the most common area you would use disinfectants, who remembers that area? Where is the most common area we would use those? For floors. Mark?
Would that be bathrooms?
That would be bathrooms. Yep. It'd be restrooms, It would also be healthcare facilities and food service areas. So I'm going to give you guys a suggestion before you start testing on this stuff. Review the information in our Google Classroom. So let's go into our classroom because we're going to be using that today. And you guys should be seeing that now. And in our Google Classroom, I am in the portion here under hard floor cleaning, the little ISSA handout on the chemicals and so forth, or everything regarding cleaning of hard floor surfaces. And you'll notice it talks all about the equipment, the mop buckets, the ringers, and questions. It has a lot of review questions. I encourage you to use this as a reference tool as you're preparing for your testing. All right. Breaks down about the speeds of equipment that we've been talking about. Now, in our lesson, we also discussed on Friday about floor pads and how floor pads are coming in different colors. That is going to relate to today's lesson because today we get into the procedures. And part of our procedures will be using of floor equipment. And I'm going to introduce one last piece of equipment today, and that is called the automatic scrubber. It is a lifesaver if you are doing large amounts of flooring. So the different floor pads, if you remember, a white pad is used for polishing. And actually, I think I have that in here. So let's. Yep, no, it's not in this slide. So that's in one of the videos that's in this section as well. But the white pad was used for polishing. Red pads are used for daily floor cleaning. When we go up, blue or green color pads are used for deeper cleaning. Black pads are typically used for stripping of finishes. And then you'll have a variety of colored pads and hair blended pads for buffing of floors with a high-speed electric or high-speed propane burnisher. I mentioned to you guys how floor finishes were created, and whether we're talking about a floor finish or we are talking about, sorry, I'm scrolling through here because I want to get to our procedures. Any other hard floor, doesn't matter whether it's resilient, it's stone, or it's wood. The procedures that we're going to discuss today are uniformly the same. There are some adjustments to that, such as about burnishing of floors or buffing of floors. And we'll get in and discuss that today. But we're going to go through the basic procedures, and then you're going to see this applied in a training video for how grocery stores are cleaned. So with that being said, I want to start the video portion of this. So if you bear with me, I do want to record this for those who are not here with us today.
Recording in progress.
So this lesson today begins with the concept of discussing the procedures of cleaning of hard floor surfaces. And as I mentioned, this would be the same procedures whether we are doing resilient flooring, we are doing stone floors, or if we are doing wood floors. So those core basic procedures involve sweeping, dust mopping, mopping, and then possibly gloss restoration through buffing. So as we go through these procedures, we'll reference the tools and equipment as well as the chemicals that you guys would cover. Now, we begin with sweeping first because sweeping basically is getting the debris away from the edges, getting the corners and things swept out that we might not be able to get to with our dust mop. As well as things like certain mats that may be in the way, if there are tight spaces that we needed to get into. Sweeping accomplishes that. It's also the opportunity, our first opportunity, to be able to remove any gum or stickers off the floor. Stickers are a real pain, but carrying a putty knife with you allows you to be able to do that. So again, you'll see some of this in this training video that we've put together. The second step, but most important procedure, is dust mopping. Now, who can help me with this? Why do you guys think dust mopping would be such a critical function of this? Why is it the most important feature? I have TD, which I'm assuming, is that Robert?
No, that's me, Antonio.
Okay, Tony. Okay, Tony, why do you think dust mopping is the most important procedure?
Well, you mentioned, I mean, particles are in the air. You don't go over a surface every 12 hours, more dust accumulates. It's just going to turn into more of a problem, more soil, more dirt, more maintenance.
Yep, very good. Mark, do you want to add to that?
I think if you left the dust on there, it would actually get into the floor when you're trying to actually clean.
You both are right.
The floor seal.
Yep, it'll damage the floor, and it doesn't matter whether it is a soft finish like on traditional floor finishes or a resilient flooring like linoleum, concrete. That dry soil, if we don't remove it, will embed itself into the surface. Tony, did you have another comment? Okay. So dust mopping is critical to that. And we're going to go through the steps to dust mopping. First of all, dust mopping is just basically you're going to move the dust mop from one end of the room to the other. This could be pushing it along, going in a straight path, or it can be doing, if you're doing a large open area, maybe using an S pattern. We'll talk about that in a minute when we do the procedures of mopping. But at a certain point, you're going to need to unload that dust mop. You're going to need to push it to a spot and shake it to be able to remove the dust from it. The goal is to do this as little as possible. You want to load it up, and generally speaking, for about every 1,000 square feet of dusting, you'd want to stop and shake off your dust mop. You don't want to hit the handle against anything to shake it loose. You don't need to do that. You simply can lift it up and shake it out. I will show you a video. We used it last week, but we'll review it again for today. Once you've completely dust mopped the area, then you're going to use a brush to brush out the dust mop. But keep in mind, we want to pick up all those piles of debris that we do. So I always recommend that when you're dust mopping, instead of creating multiple piles, move everything to one large pile. Then it's a lot easier to pick up with your broom. You're not going to multiple areas of the building, as well as people who may come into the building aren't going to see all these little piles of dust and debris. After you've dust mopped or done this, you'll brush out your dust mop. Use a stiff brush, brush it out after every use. You can do that over a garbage can. You can actually also take a vacuum cleaner like your backpack vacuum and vacuum it out, and then you would retreat it. We mentioned the other day about the use of dust mop treatments, the fact that there are both wax-based and oil-based dust mop treatments. It's generally a good rule of thumb to retreat it about every 20 to 30,000 square feet of dusting. So if you're doing a large building like maybe a grocery store, that's usually around 30,000 square feet. Whereas if you were doing a school, that would be between 20 and 30 classrooms if they were all hard floors. So it may be the case that you only have about half that square footage. You could simply dust it off and every other day apply a dust mop treatment. Tony, your question.
So if the facility you're at that you're cleaning for, if let's say they don't have specialty dust mop treatment, can you do like diluted, like multi-purpose cleaner on that dust head?
No, because what'll happen is, and it's a good question, if we use another chemical, like let's say like a multi-purpose or an all-purpose cleaner, what's going to happen is you're going to create a little bit of a muddy mess, but it doesn't assist in the attraction of dust because once that dries on there, it's doing nothing. Whereas a dust mop treatment has the ability, it creates uh, a, the ability for it to attract dust to the dust mop head. So use only a dust mop treatment. If you don't have a dust mop treatment, then your facility should be either using a dust mop that doesn't require a treatment, which would be a microfiber dust mop. I showed you a sample of that the other day. Or you would use a pre-treated dust mop that is used like through a laundry service where they pre-treated ahead of time. Mark, your comment or question.
Question regarding the treatment. Okay, you treat it and it's supposed to sit for 12 hours. Is that the same for operation that's 24 hours?
Yeah, you
Say
rotate your dust
like
mops.
so who's ever coming in behind you? I mean, how do you distinguish between what needs to sit for 12 hours opposed to me coming on shift saying, I don't know, this one's being soaked. Do I grab another one or
Yep.
you know?
So let's use an example of an airport, right? Because they would typically run a 24-hour shift. They'll run a nighttime deep cleaning, but they'll have daytime work, and maybe every shift is dust mopping areas. What you would want to do is rotate dust mops. That's a good idea for color coding because then you're using one for each shift. The other idea is when to know, even if you don't have the ability to color code, the one that is being treated, you can take the head off of the handle and set it up on the shelf or hang it up on a wall, not attached to the handle, so that that shift isn't using it. So there's different ways you can accomplish that. Nelson, your comment.
The dust mop that's already with the school, they have order. Is that pre-treated dust mop?
So they have what again now?
When they order the dust mop, it come in a roll, and then you cut the length.
Those are pre-treated. Yes. Yep. That's a very common type of pre-treated dust mop. And those are what we call disposables. Because after you pull off a section, you cut it off, you don't wash those. Whereas a traditional dust mop can be washed. All right. And then storing your dust mop, you want to hang it with the head facing out away from the wall. Now, our next step in the floor care procedures is mopping of floors. Some basic steps. We want to use a wet floor sign. We're going to try and remove all of our black marks. There is a difference, and we're going to talk about mopping differences between what's called damp mopping and wet mopping. A couple of important things is also to use a proper dilution ratio. So if the chemical manufacturer tells you to dilute it 2 ounces to the gallon, use a measuring cup, dilute it, or use a chemical mixing station that will properly dilute it for you. One thing I didn't mention in our chemical portion, if you are using a chemical dilution station, be aware that using that, you don't want to fill half of it with chemical out of there and then pour just straight water. It is already pre-mixed for you. You don't need to add any additional water. I've had some guys get a little confused with those things. Those are like a Coke machine for the chemical business. You push the button, it's going to give you product that is ready to use. Always use clean mops, clean buckets. One of the things that surprises me so much in our business is the use of dirty mop buckets. And, we've talked about maintaining your equipment. Your mop bucket is one of your core pieces of equipment. A mop bucket you're going to use all the time. Maintain those. Make sure your mop bucket isn't filthy dirty. It gets filthy dirty if people leave dirty water sitting in there and don't rinse it out well. If that's the case, take some good cleaner, some all-purpose cleaner that has a pH, of around 9. Spray it in there, scrub it out, clean it up. If you can't get it restored, replace your mop bucket periodically if it's embedded with dirt and soils, because that's just going to contaminate your cleaner. Same thing with your mop heads. Replace your mop heads. When they get to the point that you rinse them out, they still are filthy dirty. They smell. The strands are broken. It's time to replace it. When we go through the procedures, we'll talk about how you turn your mop frequently. And lastly, the idea of using a double bucket. So I showed you guys this the other day in the mop buckets. The idea of it's not 2 separate mop buckets. It's one bucket that has 2 compartments in it, a clean solution and a rinse water. And so let's go through some of the procedures. First, the technique. There's 2 basic techniques to mopping. One is called the figure 8. The other is called a figure S. Now, the idea of a figure 8 is this, and if you'll notice on my screen, it has the circles. What happens is you will frame the area. You'll do as you'll notice the technician doing. They go up along the top, alongside, top, come back down, and then they work in a figure 8 motion. In a figure S, it's very similar, but you have a lot more overlap with the figure S. And generally speaking, in this, doesn't quite show it. If you're doing large areas, a lot of guys will use the figure S because they will be able to see the line that they're going down. It's sometimes a little easier. Whereas if you are doing small, tighter areas, some will use the figure 8. The whole concept is not to miss anything. You're going back and forth, overlapping. Now, always remember safety, not to let the mopping solution run under areas, put up wet floor signs. So be careful of that. The other thing to be aware of when you're talking about mopping of floors, when we talk about a damp mop is a mop that has been put into the bucket, wrung out tightly so that it is damp. It's not leaving large amounts of water on the floor. Most of the time when we're cleaning a floor, we're damp mopping it. There are times that we do what's called wet mopping. Wet mopping is where you put your mop in your bucket, you lift it up, you might allow it to stop dripping, but you're going to put it on the floor pretty wet. And we use that process a lot more if we are doing a deeper clean. Maybe we're going to strip and wax a floor, scrub and recoat the floor. Maybe we're going to be scrubbing a tile floor, and we want the cleaner to sit wet for a period of time. So in that process, wet mopping has its application, but part of daily cleaning is usually damp mopping or tight mopping. That is, again, you put it in the bucket, you wring it out so that it's not dripping, and you mop your floor with it. If we're using a microfiber mop, that would be a case of you either wring out the mop head or you would press it against that sieve kind of thing, so it allows you to get most of the water out, and then mop the floor. One other rule of thumb is I recommend if you are mopping floors with a mop bucket and a cotton or string mop, that you change your mop water about every 1,000 square feet. And that might be a challenge if you're doing a large amount of square footage. So there's some advantages to that, and I'll show you a method. So let's jump to this method. And this is a fun video for you guys. I hope you guys will enjoy this. So we mentioned the fact that in cleaning of floors, we would use a mop bucket, right? One of the machines that we also talked about was that low speed buffer that could be used for scrubbing floors or removing of soils. Another option to this is a machine called an automatic scrubber. In the video I'm about to show you guys, and I'll stop and pause it and point this out to you, an automatic scrubber has the feature of applying solution onto the floor, scrubbing the floor clean, and picking up the solution all in one pass. A lot of times that is used for large areas. If you are cleaning in a school, that might be things like cleaning the multi-purpose room or the gymnasium. You would use an automatic scrubber. If you are cleaning in a healthcare environment, that might be the common areas like the hallways, the large areas there would be done with an automatic scrubber. If you are cleaning in office buildings, again, large open areas such as in hallways or lobbies. Nelson, your comment.
Yes, one thing we got to remember with the auto scrubber, they have different pads.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about, the different color pads the other day. The white pad is a polishing pad. Generally speaking, that we use that to restore gloss. The most common color pad for cleaning floors with an auto scrubber is a red color pad. You can occasionally go to a blue color pad, but be careful with that to make sure it is not going to scratch the floor. Don't go any more aggressive for daily cleaning than a blue, but most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, it would be a red pad. There is an option to that when we talk about concrete. We are not going to talk about concrete today. Tasha, your question.
What is a blue pad used for?
So a blue pad would be used for a deeper clean. So for example, you're cleaning with a red pad and you're noticing you're still not getting enough soil. You may switch over to a blue pad, but it's also a good sign that something needs to be done to restore some gloss, maybe either putting more coating on the floor, polishing the concrete more. Those would be, good indications that if I've got to go to a blue pad, typically my finish is wearing out. Most of the time we use blue pads for light duty scrub and recoats, where we're scrubbing the floor clean, a little deeper clean, before we laid finish. The other time I like to use it, if I am doing a good scrub clean before using a mop on restorer, I would use a blue pad because it gets a little bit more soil off, but it won't take off a layer of finish. It'll just scrub it really good. Whereas the darker you go, the more finish you'll take off of a floor. A black pad will strip the finish off. So let's take a look at that. Let's see how this process works. And again, in our classroom, under floor cleaning in a grocery store, you're going to see a video that I have posted here. And let me share that with you guys. Welcome to Integrity Maintenance Solutions Field Service Technician Training. So this was designed for grocery store cleaning.
This video will cover personal protective equipment, equipment setup, chemicals, sweeping, dust mopping, auto scrubbing, mopping, burnishing, When entering the store, be sure to clock in with the UKG Ready mobile app. Take a picture of your automatic scrubber.
I'm skipping ahead just a little bit because some of this relates to this company's policies for how their new hires or how their employees start their shift. So let's get to the actual cleaning procedures.
Have all your required personal protective equipment, or PPE. Be sure to use gloves when cleaning restrooms, working with chemicals, cleaning your machines, disinfecting, and doing front-end cleaning. Anytime you are working with chemicals that have the potential to splash in your eyes, it is important to wear safety glasses. It is important that you wear appropriate shoes. Open-toed shoes, sandals, or cloth footwear are not appropriate. Due to the highly contagious nature of COVID-19, all employees are required to wear masks anytime you're working in a store. If you fail to wear a mask, you will be asked to leave the store and will be contacted by your manager. Refer to your field service technician checklist. Gather all your needed equipment and tools necessary to perform your cleaning tasks. This includes auto scrubber, propane burnisher, Ecolab cleaning caddy, mops, mop bucket, dust mop, putty knife, broom, dustpan, and cleaning chemicals. When setting up your scrubber, be sure to note the level of the cleaning solution in the solution tank. This will help you to determine how much chemical will be needed to be added when you fill your tanks. When filling your scrubber, use only cold water. Hot water can damage the floor finish. The Tennant 5680 and Advance SC900 have tank capacities of 30 gallons. Therefore, do not use more than 3 capfuls of the Diversey UHS cleaner for an empty tank. If the tank is not empty, reduce the amount of chemicals to 1 capful per 8 gallons of water added. Empty the dirty water tank to make sure the tank is empty. Check your floor pads to make sure that you have clean, fresh floor pads. When checking your floor pads, make sure that they are clean and free of debris. If they are dirty, flip them over.
Oops. Hold on a second, guys. I hit the wrong button here. I stopped the share and I didn't mean to do that, but I wanted to pause it for just a second because I wanted to hit on a key point here. So one of the things we look at here is in relation to the floor pad. You'll notice that pad is very soiled. One of the ways you can prevent that is at the end of a shift when you're using an automatic scrubber, wash the pad out before you finish up your shift, cleaning up your equipment. Take that pad and set it up, hang it up, on the hook of your tool hook where you keep all your other mop handles and tools. By doing this, this is going to get this where your pads will last longer. And as well, you're not scrubbing the floor with a dirty pad. Pads have 2 sides to it. So you'll be able to flip it over, use the other side. Generally speaking, a floor pad will last anywhere from, a few days to well over a week of daily use, depending on the amount of square footage you're cleaning, how heavily soiled it is, and the type of floor. Some floors may be a little bit more aggressive on the pad, so be aware of that. But I recommend that you replace your pads. They're not expensive to replace it every week. So, all right, let's continue in that video. I think it bumped me out of the video, so we'll continue, and I'm going to jump ahead on it real quick.
that you have clean, fresh floor pads. When checking your floor pads, make sure that they are clean and free of debris. If they are dirty, flip them over or replace them.
That is what's called a retainer ring that I was snapping onto the pad driver. That's a pad driver. Usually there's going to be 2 pads on there. There's the other side as well.
To set up your propane burnisher, first, check the propane tank to make sure you have enough fuel to complete the job. Then check to make sure you have a clean pad. If the pad has debris in it or is dirty, then flip it over to the clean side or replace it.
That's another version of a retainer ring.
The first step in your cleaning process begins with sweeping the floor. Begin by sweeping the corners and edges, starting at the back of the store and working your way around. Be sure to sweep all mats and carpeted areas.
Goal with sweeping is going to be to get into areas that your dust mop would not cover. It wouldn't go well over these mats or get in underneath in corners and edges.
Dust mopping is the second part of the sweeping and dust mopping process. Be sure to get the entire store. Do not leave piles throughout the store. Rather, put your pile in one central location, usually out of the way of the stocking room. Then move that pile to the back of the store when you're done and pick it up with a dustpan.
Notice how I shook it out there?
Once you've completed the sweeping and dust mopping of the floor, it's time to auto scrub it. It's important to note that you would never auto scrub a floor without sweeping or dust mopping first. This would cause damage to the scrubber as well as leave scratches and debris on the floor. Be careful when scrubbing the floor not to leave puddles. This can occur by putting down too much solution or taking too tight of corners. If you find you're doing this, adjust your cleaning path or adjust your floor squeegee. Be sure to pick up any excessive water or puddles with the mop right away, as this could cause a slip and fall injury. An auto scrubber can't reach all areas of the store. Therefore, it's important to mop these areas. This would include getting under tables, around corners and edges of the store, around the check stands and the entrances, the hallways, break room, and stairs. Make sure any area that you cannot clean with an auto scrubber is swept and mopped before leaving the store.
All right, I'm going to pause this share for just a minute, and we'll come back to the process of propane burnishing. I want to go back through the procedures with you and just reinforce what we saw. Because again, it doesn't matter the flooring surface. This could have been a wood floor. It could be, as you noticed, this was a stained concrete floor. It could be a wax floor. So from that standpoint, the process was to gather all the tools, right? To get the equipment set up first. So we got the auto scrubber filled up, we got our mop buckets filled up, we had everything ready to go to begin our shift. This process should be the case with every cleaning task you do. If you're going to clean restrooms, have all your restroom cleaning stuff together and ready to go. If you're going to clean above floors, you're, for example, cleaning an office building, you would get everything ready and put it onto your cart. In this case, this particular cleaning person, their primary responsibility is to do the floor cleaning. So from that standpoint, they gathered everything they needed for doing that. Sweeping was the first thing to get those edges done. We exaggerated some of the motions to get that point across to people, but that idea of getting debris out of corners and edges. You notice how big that piece of equipment was, the auto scrubber? It's not going to get into tight corners. So from that standpoint, we are going to have to use a mop and broom to get the dry soil out first and then the wet. The other advantage to this system of using an automatic scrubber as a daily cleaning tool versus mopping is you will remove more soil, because what you're doing is you're applying solution down, scrubbing it, and picking it up. If you think about it, it's a more aggressive cleaning than a traditional mop because we're using that pad to scrub the floor. It also leaves the floor very dry when it's done. So from a safety standpoint, this is a fantastic way to clean large areas. Now, I would not recommend to use an auto scrubber when you have people like during a day shift, for example, where large amounts of people are around. Because as I mentioned in the video, don't leave puddles. Inevitably in an auto scrubber, you will leave some puddles that you'll need to mop up. That could lead to a potential slip and fall issue for a customer who's using the building. So I recommend it to be done at nighttime when there is the least amount of people in the building. That's for safety standpoint. Okay. I also don't recommend auto scrubbing for small areas. Now they do make auto scrubbers as small as 20 inches that could be used. But if we're cleaning, for example, a patient room, if we were cleaning a classroom where it's a small amount of hard floors, we're cleaning a restroom, those scrubbers are not designed for those small areas. It's really designed for wide, large open areas. So recommend the use of that. Questions about this part of the process? It's fairly self-explanatory. If you think about the concept of waste, wet, wipe, we remove the dry soils first, so through sweeping and dust mopping, picking those up. We use a cleaning solution to get the wet, sticky soils up second. And lastly, we pick that up through either an automatic scrubber that'll pick up the solution or using a tight mop that will do it in areas and leave it dry. Mark.
Yeah, the scrubber. Excuse me. Does the can you turn off the scrubber and just go back and just use the vacuum to pick up the puddles?
So it has a squeegee on the back part of it. So it's a good question, and I was hoping somebody would ask some questions about the machine. So I'm going to take us back into looking about the scrubber itself. And bear with me here.
Because I used a sweeper before, where it's got kind of the water, the sprayer, and whatnot that you're the ride along.
Yeah, and they make riding sweepers. They also make riding scrubbers. They have riding vacuums. So let me.
That's why I was wondering if you can just vacuum, opposed to
So
scrubbing and vacuum spraying.
so the reality is these machines are not designed to be used dry. They're to be used wet. So I'm going to use this as a good example of a good picture for this. This machine is a machine made by Tennant called a 5680. They're kind of one of the workhorses in the industry. The premise behind this machine is similar for all equipment. So after this loads, so you'll notice the scrub head is in the front. On the back is a squeegee. Because it's a squeegee, it's designed for wet use. You wouldn't want to use it dry because the way the vacuum system's set up, it's designed to pick up the wet solution. So this one would not be a dry sweeper. It also, this is another important point of this. One of the problems that happens, and I'm showing you that, and I'm not sharing my screen, so apologize, guys. Okay, so now you hopefully are seeing the Tennant 5680. And you'll notice on the back side here, the squeegee portion. Now, here's a problem I have seen with this piece of equipment. And that is technicians who will use it without sweeping or vacuuming first. Here's what ends up happening. You actually take and scrub the dirt into it. Now, theoretically, you could use it by lifting up the scrub head to pick up wet puddles or things like that if there was a spill. But you never really want to use this machine without getting the dust and debris up first. One, it just creates a muddy mess. But number two, it's not designed where it has a sweep portion. The debris will get stuck into the hoses and clog it. So from that standpoint, I don't recommend dry use only. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, thank you.
Now, a couple other features I'll point out about this machine is it's a large machine, and the setups of these machines are going to vary, whether they have a solution tank on the top or the bottom, some have the tank is all around the battery system. These run on batteries. So because of that, there's no cords to them. The batteries have to be charged at night. And the older style machines are what we refer to as a deep cycle battery. So from that standpoint, they also require periodically replacing the fluids in it. Because batteries, if anybody knows a little bit about batteries, batteries have metal plates inside of them. And when we put water in there, that water is what creates battery acid, and it's what creates the electrical charge in there. What we typically want to use is distilled water for those because it won't cause a buildup on the metal plates, and the batteries will last longer. If we use tap water, which has minerals in it, what happens is the minerals will corrode the metal plates, and the plates will break down very quickly. So from that standpoint, just straight tap or straight distilled water that you can buy in the stores is perfect for filling them. Nowadays, they've come out with new style batteries that do not require any maintenance. They have a gel in them, and that gel, it's designed to last 2 to 3 years before you have to replace it. So much longer life cycles. The battery technology's improved a lot over a number of years. But the most important thing I can tell you about an auto scrubber, besides maintaining it and cleaning out the filters, is the use of a charger. Make sure you charge it up after each use. Generally speaking, for every hour of use, it requires 2 hours of charging time. The other thing about it is make sure you allow the batteries to run completely down, so you run it the whole shift. It's not a good idea to run it for 15 minutes and then plug it in to charge. That's called short charging the batteries. And batteries have a little bit of a memory, so it's not good for the batteries to do that. Okay. Nelson, your thoughts?
With the auto scrubber, you got to once you get finished using it, make sure the pass removed, and the squeegee, because the squeegee will hold
Very
the
much
grease
so.
on it. So you got to make sure you wipe those or rinse it off and let that drip dry.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a training video right now that is exactly that, about maintenance of an auto scrubber. How do you maintain it after your use? Changing and checking all the filters on it, rinsing the tanks clean. That's the other thing. Just like a mop bucket, an auto scrubber has tanks that need to be rinsed out. The dirty water tank should be rinsed clean. The solution tank should be drained and rinsed out. Because one of the things about soaps or detergents, if they're allowed to sit in a container for a long period of time, they will turn slimy. So, good idea, rinse your tanks out. The only system that you do not have to rinse those tanks or empty them is if you are using an aqueous ozone or electrostatically charged water, okay? Because there is no chemical to that. In fact, Nelson, you probably could testify that the auto scrubbers are much cleaner with the aqueous ozone than they were with previous chemicals like the H2 orange tube. Very much so, huh? Yep. Yeah, I've seen the difference. It's noticeably different. So look, I come from chemical manufacturing. I worked for chemical manufacturers for over 10 years. I am a big proponent of no chemical as much as possible. I like aqueous ozone. I think the technology is now advanced enough for general cleaning. It does a great job. Not for deep cleaning, but for general daily cleaning. Okay, so let's talk about now gloss restoration. It's the third part of this. So I'm going to go back into our Google Classroom, because there we will kind of talk a little bit about buffing of floors and maintaining floors through two processes. One is spray buffing. The other is referred to as mop-on restoration. And those are part of the process of restoring gloss. I'm going to jump ahead quite a bit. Okay. And it's not actually covering it in here. I forgot about that. All right. So let's go into our book, because that's where it's going to have some of the procedures on there. So if you guys will reference your book, and you're going to look onto page 71, finish restoration. Okay. To maintain floor finishes, you can do one of two methods. One is called spray buffing. The other is called using a mop-on restore. Now, I want to explain to you what these two processes are. Spray buffing is done after you've damp mopped the floor, and it involves taking a chemical specifically designed for this purpose that we would spray onto the floor, allow it to dry, and then buff it out. A mop-on restore is done right after you sweep. You can actually apply it as a cleaning solution. They make cleaner restorers. I don't like the cleaner restorers as much as I do to do a second step. I prefer to mop the floor clean first, and then mop on the restore. A lot of times spray buffing is also done. You can use a side-by-side machine to spray buff with for doing small areas. So it's a kind of a neat process. But most of the time these days we'll use a high-speed electric that's about a 1500 RPM machine for spray buffing. So it is spraying a solution down, allowing it to dry for a moment, and then buffing it out with a pad. Most of the time when we're doing this with a high-speed electric, we will use a white polishing pad. Now, with a mop-on restore, you'll want to reference the manufacturer's instructions, because a lot of mop-on restorers will be made by a manufacturer who will also tell you to use their floor pad that is designed to give you the best possible results. So reference that to see what the manufacturer is representing or recommending. Here's the basic guidelines, though. Besides putting up a wet floor sign, when you're spray buffing, make sure that you keep your cord over your shoulder, out of the way, so that you're not going to catch the cord as you're buffing the floor. Make sure, if you're using a swing buffer, you saw in the video the other day, the gentleman made the comment about using a swing buffer. Never let go of the machine. You'll notice it has a handle and two safety switches. Don't let go of the machine. Just let go of the power switch. Otherwise, the machine can wrap around you and damage you or a surface. Make sure your machine has a switch that shuts it off. And make sure the cords are in good working order. Besides that, it's just spraying the chemical on, buffing it out. Not too much involved with that. The other thing to point out, the mop head that you would use if you are doing a mop-on restore would be a rayon or a synthetic mop, not a cotton mop. Reason being, rayon or synthetic mops will not absorb as much of the finish in a mop-on restore as a cotton mop does. A cotton mop soaks more of it onto the mop than it does applying on the floor. Right? If you're going to be doing the mop-on restore, sweep the floor, make sure your gum and debris stickers are off. Mop on the restore, allow it to dry, and then buff or burnish it out. So pretty simple process to it. This is part of the maintenance to it. So whether you're using a propane buffer, a mop-on restore, or a spray buff, those are part of the regular maintenance. They are just gloss restoration or finish restoration. But understand, these techniques only apply to a floor where I have floor finish on them. If there's no floor finish on it, I do not need to use that. So this part of the methods, I've got somebody's got a little bit of background noise there. This method of restoration on a floor, finish restoration, only applies if I'm using an acrylic floor finish. If I'm doing a wood floor, I do not need to do this. If I am dealing with a polished concrete floor, I do not need to do this. I'm only going to use this method if I'm using it on a floor that has floor finish on it. And it's because the spray buff solution or the mop on restorer solution is made out of a similar polymer as floor finish, and it's an acrylic material. Okay, so acrylic floor finishes is what we're specifically talking about. This is also a lot of times called floor wax. That's the terminology that you may hear. So from that standpoint, if you're being asked to maintain the floors, your boss may say, hey, I want you guys to buff the floors. That would involve likely a spray buff or using a mop on restore. The third method that you can use that our book doesn't talk about is the use of a propane buffer for doing that. And a propane buffer does not require the use of a spray solution or a mop on restore. It will provide gloss without it. A couple things I want to touch back on just as some important things that are factors. I mentioned to you about the use of, when we're talking about mopping, okay, when we're dealing with stairwells, this is going to be an important point for you guys. When you are covering the next lesson on carpet, you're going to see that this is reversed. When we are mopping a stairwell, we start at the top of the stairs and work our way down, but we keep our mop bucket at the bottom of the stairs. Why do you guys think that's the case? Why would we mop a floor on a stairwell from the top to the bottom?
Because you won't have to carry your, this is what I'm thinking, from top to bottom. If you have your mop bucket on the top, then you're going to walk over your mopping, and then we'll call a safety hazard because number one, you got to go back up to the top, get your mop bucket, wring it out. So you keep on going back and forth. But the conclusion is that always work backwards from top from bottom so that you won't have to walk over your down floor or go get the mop
You're
bucket.
there, Nelson. You've already kind of said it. So from a safety standpoint, you don't want to have to walk back over a wet floor. So anytime you're mopping a floor, you mop yourself out of an area. That includes a stairwell. The mop bucket should always be behind you, not in front of you, right? Because you don't want to have to walk back over your floor that's already wet. You could slip and fall. Tony.
So if in fact, let's say you're mopping not a stairwell and you're mopping, like you said, out of the area. Let's say you're doing like a large gymnasium, are you going to work in horizontal strips from, say, the stage, if there was a stage there, all the way back in horizontal S's and then move over?
First of all, I hope you never have to mop that large of an area by yourself.
I hope not.
But I will tell you, it has happened. I've had guys have to mop an entire grocery store. So not a great idea. But here's the thing. You always work your way out of a room. So you start at the far end and you work your way to the door. Okay? Keeping your mop bucket behind you. Because your mop bucket, you're going to go dunk it in the solution and then come and apply it. Now, I want to show you another thing about the technique. You guys can all see me standing right now. All right. One of the things about the technique of mopping, I don't want to see you guys do. I don't want to see you doing this. In fact, give me a second. I'm going to grab a mop hat. So one of the methods that I have seen people do when they're mopping, they're leaning over, they're leaning like this, they're doing like this, but they're leaning over. Okay. The problem with that is you're going to cause strain on your lower back. And if you imagine you're mopping a large amount of flooring every day, when you are bending over like this, you're going to get strain. You'll have strain also in your shoulder, elbow, your back, all kinds of bad problems. When you stand upright and you mop and you use the technique of a figure 8 or a figure S, you'll notice I keep my mop in front of me. I'm working my way back out of a room. But now I'm upright. I have less fatigue on my back. I'm not straining as I'm leaning over. It's a lot safer method to use than if you guys are doing the method that I was just pointing out. I always know a rookie janitor when I see them grab a mop and start doing that. And it's one of the first things I want to correct, because that's the thing that's going to cause one of the biggest long-term injuries is back strain. Okay. And in our business, we have to be thinking about how to use our bodies more efficiently, because this is a physical job, right? We're going to be busy. We're moving all the time. So even if you're just doing something like using an auto scrubber, you're still constantly moving. You're on your feet all day long. Nelson, you've experienced this, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I was going to mention it's like slow dancing. Take your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like dancing. Take your time, kind of move with that mop handle. And I will tell you guys, I have seen some of the most amazing guys mopping floors doing large amounts. I think it was about 4 years ago, I was down in San Bernardino working with a crew of 2 guys. They were using a microfiber flat mop, and we were laying a coating on a polished concrete floor. They had to seal this, and it wasn't a floor finish, but it was a specialty seal for concrete, because concrete's very porous and it soaks into the floor very quickly. I kid you not, the 2 of them did an entire store, 25,000 square feet, in about an hour. They were moving. They were spraying solution down, and they were using that technique. And the cool thing is, you can go in a path as long as your body's moving and you're using good technique. You can cover an area sometimes as much as 8 foot wide by learning how to use it, and if you have the right size tool for it, especially with microfiber, because microfiber, like a dust mop, can come in widths up to about, I think 3 foot is about the biggest that you'll get for microfiber. But it was amazing watching them cover that and how graceful they were. I mean, these guys were not tired or sore or anything. They were just moving. They wanted to get the job done. That way they can get some rest after they were done. Okay. A couple other important things about mopping of floors. If you are wet mopping, okay, such as if we are doing scrubbing of floors or something like that, if we leave cleaning solution on the floor too long, it can actually cause something called clouding. That is where the finish will start to turn white, okay? And that actually will remove the finish. So, you know, in the video, you saw the guy who had the mop underneath the table, and he was mopping underneath those. He was using a very wrung out mop because that dried within just a few minutes. But if you're leaving puddles with mopping, you're likely going to cause damage to the finish. Baseboards, something to mention about baseboards. So we were talking the other day about the use of a string mop versus a flat microfiber mop. So I'm going to actually point something out because my tool here. You'll notice is a flat microfiber mop. This tool is fantastic for getting baseboards because first, as you notice how thin it is, I can be able to do that, and I can tilt it up on its side using the mop handle, and I can get my baseboards cleaned. Now, generally speaking, you shouldn't have to mop baseboards very frequently. It is something that just needs to be periodically done. So a couple of things. One, if you're going to use a mop bucket, make sure that you are using a nice clean mop to do it. But the flat mop is the best. And important also, try not to mop the wall while you're working on baseboards. Sometimes what will happen is guys will do that. And some cheap paint jobs like flat paint doesn't take much aggressiveness to start to wear that paint off of the wall. So just you don't need to do that. All right, so let me go back to our video and we're going to show you again the final step in that process of burnishing the floor. And he was using a propane buffer. Now, a propane buffer is a machine with a combustion engine on it. And get to that spot in the video and then we'll share the screen. Okay, let's
An auto scrubber can't reach all areas of the store. Therefore, it's important to mop these areas. This would include getting under tables, around corners and edges of the store, around the check stands and the entrances, the hallways, break room, and stairs. Make sure any area that you cannot clean with an auto scrubber is swept and mopped before leaving the store. To turn on the propane machine, make sure the propane tank is secured to the machine, that the tank is open, then turn the ignition key to start the machine. You may have to prime it at times to get it started. Begin burnishing the floor by walking at a moderate pace. As you turn and come back down, be sure to overlap your last path by 2 to 4 inches. A helpful tip: do not stop the burnisher with the pad on the floor. It will leave a circle on the floor. Keep the machine moving when the pad is on the floor. To finish your cleaning steps, do a final dust mop. Make sure the mats are clean, stairs have been swept and mopped, the break rooms have been swept and mopped, and trash removed from the break rooms.
All right. So that was propane burnishing of a floor. That, as you saw, internal combustion engine. Here's what's really cool about propane buffers. If you ever have a chance to use them, they will restore gloss immediately. And the reason they do that is a couple things happens when we're buffing a floor. A floor buffer itself, because of the speed that it is turning, it is creating an abrasion to it. It actually creates what we refer to as a burnishing. Okay, it's the friction that creates heat as that is turning at a very high speed. That heat does two things. One, with an acrylic floor finish, it helps it to soften a little bit and then kind of fill in some of the scratches and those things. But number two thing it does is because the pad itself has a little bit of abrasion, especially like a hair blended pad, it'll take any uneven spots off. And as I mentioned the other day, the smoother the floor, the better the gloss, because gloss is created because light is reflected directly back up. So from that standpoint, a burnisher literally is creating heat, okay? Not from the propane, but just because of the speed that it is turning and because of the pad itself. That's also why they use what we refer to as hair blended pads, because that hair creates more heat and has a better job of creating that friction that allows the finish to kind of heat back up and fill in a little bit. But more than anything, it's just smoothing it out. So that's how floor finishers respond to burnishing. With using a cord electric machine, we don't get as much of that. That's why we use the spray buff, because we'll spray something down to fill in those spots and then we'll buff it out and it'll respond, or a mop on restorer, so it'll respond. Tony.
So I mean, similar concept to, like, let's say trying to wax your car out with like a ham buffer or whatnot. I mean, I noticed when I was trying to restore a few of my used cars in the past before sale, and it's like if I stayed in one spot, that I could see a lot more of that paint going onto the pad because of that heat and that friction.
Yep.
So that's why you just got to keep moving because of those RPMs. You don't want to damage anything.
Exactly the same concept. Burnishing or buffing of things is nothing new. We've been doing it for well over 100 years. Some of the original floor finishes were made out of carnauba wax. The wet look term of floor finishes came from that. And once upon a time, bowling alleys used to use a paste wax that they would put onto the bowling alley, and then a gentleman would take a floor buffer and he would polish that out, and it would make it so slick and smooth that the ball would spin. Nowadays we use a machine that sprays down a coating on the floor, and it's an oil that they spray directly on the bowling lanes. But the concept of polishing, that's been around for a long time, and we use it, like you mentioned, Tony, on doing cars. We use it for a lot of other type of things that we might polish. I've seen guys take a piece of wood furniture and use a paste wax and a polishing pad and polish the wood furniture to a super high gloss. So that concept's been around. So those are the basic steps of it, guys. Let's review. We're removing the dust and debris through sweeping and dust mopping. We're removing the heavy, sticky soils, the oily substances, through mopping, or if we're doing large areas, use of an auto scrubber. And then we are restoring gloss if need be by buffing of the floor. Pretty simple, right? Hard floors are not complicated. And as I mentioned, if it's not a floor that uses a floor finish, then we don't have to worry about gloss restoration with those things. Now, I will tell you this. I like to take this class a step beyond what we're doing here. I like you guys to have more knowledge than just about this type of floor. So from that standpoint, I'm going to show you another technique, another system that is for polished concrete floors. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in it today because I want you guys, I don't want to confuse things. So I like to keep it simple, and then we'll we'll do this on polished concrete. But on Wednesday's class, I'm going to show you polished concrete floors. And then I am going to do something. So, Tony, in your chat, Tony likes to send me messages, and thank you. He asked, is one part of the deep cleaning crew, those shifts that work graveyard and weekends, required? So, Tony, why don't you first kind of explain your question a little bit?
No, I'm just curious because when we were starting the class and we were talking about there's so many layers and so many ways you can go with this, you know, and you guys were talking about how big of an industry it is.
Yes.
Being part of deep cleaning crews is all at night. So I'm just curious, like, is that now you're a night owl? Now you're going to be working from 12 at midnight till like 7 in the morning?
Depends
if you're part
on
of a deep cleaning crew at the airport.
It depends on where you're working at.
Yeah.
So here's an example.
Okay.
If you are working at an airport and you're working on a deep cleaning or specialty crew, then yeah, that's going to be done at night. If you are working in a school, a lot of the deep cleaning is done during the summertime, and it's done during the day shift. Okay? If you are doing, and taking it a step further, if you are doing polished concrete, you may be doing daytime shifts where you're doing it before the building is occupied or when it's shut down. If you're doing gym floor restoration, you're most certainly doing morning time, because one of the best times to do gymnasium floors when you're restoring those is summertime, when we have good temperatures, and you can start early in the morning. A lot of times the guys like to start 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're done by noon in doing gymnasium floors. So that's what we will cover, is gymnasium floors and concrete floors on Wednesday. Now, to wrap up today's, I'm going to show you a couple things. This is something that is not part of your testing. It's not part of this lesson. So I'm giving you a little bit of tease for advanced course, but also answers some of Tony's question about deep cleaning. And that is about stripping and waxing of a floor. Okay. And stripping and waxing of floors is typically a little bit more detailed. It's a little bit more specialized. Now, once upon a time, every custodian in the schools would strip and wax. And I think, do you guys still pretty much do that site-based, Nelson?
Do what now?
Stripping and waxing floors. It's still done by the custodians, but it's done in the summertime, right?
Yes, it could be done in summertime or in the wintertime when they're
winter
on break. Depends on if they're going to do the cafeteria or classroom.
Now, this is a dying art form, guys, because more and more floors are going away from stripping and waxing of floors. But I want to give you guys an idea of stripping and waxing floors. And this is just a little bit of a time lapse as a guy shows you. So let me get this video loaded. It's off of YouTube. And I have to go past their stupid commercial. So
for a lawn that looks like this, but your lawn looks a little bit more like this, then you should click right here.
There we go. All right. So let me share my screen, because this is it's a pretty neat video that shows a little bit about stripping and waxing floors from a janitorial service.
Cleaning Systems, thank you for watching another video. We are here in Cartersville, Georgia, and we are going to strip and wax some floors. Let me show you what they look like before we get started. We're gonna be setting this up as a time lapse. I've already swept.
So one of the things I'll point out to you guys, the flooring that they are doing is what we would refer to as VCT, or vinyl composite tile. Okay, it is a resilient flooring. This is the most common type of flooring that we strip and wax.
We have a solution mixed up, but you can just see.
See how dirty and soiled it is?
All right, these are the floors before we get started. It's gonna be me and Pops.
All right. Before this guy begins, and I'm seeing the floor just like you guys, and I've watched this video, but let me ask you to help me to point out something that he didn't do right before he gets started. Anybody catching what this guy is skipping?
On the floor, or?
Yep. He's about to mop on stripper.
Yes, he have all his equipment, supplies, and backing him. All of that should be put away.
Yeah, it should be out of the way.
And
Anybody
dusting.
else?
And number
And,
one,
Archina, you said it. Tell me what it was.
Huh?
What did you say?
Dust, not remove it.
He didn't sweep or dust mop the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First they do that, then start other.
Exactly. Good job. Good catch.
Thank you.
Even when we're stripping a floor, we should do that. And Nelson, thank you for pointing out. He's got all of his stuff in the way. He's not staged real well, so. But the process is
Going today. He is the owner. I don't think you've all seen him yet, but he's a man with a plan. And we're gonna go ahead and set this time lapse up. So just enjoy the show.
All right. I get such a kick out of these videos, guys, I have to tell you. Because I love the fact that they went over the floor about 3 times in doing the floors. But it's a good example of, first of all, how important it is to be organized about it. Number 2, and granted, this one's a little silly because it was under time lapse, but the idea behind it is the floor, you saw how they flooded the floor with solution. That is typical of stripping a floor. Now, generally speaking, you don't lay it over the entire room. You do the area you're going to work on and keep it in front of you. You never want to be working where you're standing in the middle of a wet floor. Nelson.
yeah, the video is like, wow.
Thought you'd get a kick out of that, bud.
If it was me, what I would do is get the degree, degum it, do the edge, and get all my solution ready, the pad, and then start from the start from the top because you're working, you want to go backward to work out the door.
Yep.
And I will do a section at a
Yes.
time. Have my wet back in one direction to suck up the solution.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of times if you do this right, guys, this is actually it can be dangerous the way they did it. Okay? Because one of the problems with what they did is they were walking a lot on a wet floor. And anytime you walk on a wet floor, you increase your chances of slip and fall. So one of the things that Elk Grove does is they do something called using of an SPP pad, a surface preparation pad. And it can be used with either what we refer to as a rotary machine, or here's another video of one. This is from a chemical manufacturer, a janitorial supply company who makes or sells supplies called Waxy. And this is using a orbital floor machine with a surface preparation pad. You'll notice how much more efficient it is, and in many ways it's a much safer method. This video is about a minute long. It's almost sanding before the top. Okay. So I'll be honest, this method has improved. Most of the time I recommend doing it lightly wet because I don't like to put dry particulate in the air. I don't want to have to breathe finish like that. So with the surface preparation pad, it can be done wet or dry. I recommend doing it lightly wet. If you've ever worked on any body work on your car, it's the difference between wet and dry sanding. And a lot of guys will tell you the wet sanding is a lot easier. That dust is not in the air, but you do need to keep it picked up. And the nice thing is it's a lot safer. So whether it's using an orbital machine like that was, which has got a rectangular pad, or a side-by-side swing buffer that can be used, both of those will allow you to remove layers of finish very easily with this. This is not complete stripping of floor. It is deep scrubbing. Again, both the wet stripping and the chemical-free stripping are both restoration. They're both covered in the advanced course. I actually have videos specific to those. So I'm not trying to train you guys on all the steps of stripping and waxing floors. That is not part of daily maintenance of a floor. Okay? But I wanted you guys to be aware of it so you guys see a little bit about the process. And once that finish is removed, then you would lay a floor finish that you would mop onto the floor with either a microfiber mop or a rayon or nylon mop. Okay? So just again, completing the concept and the picture for you guys. Any questions about what we covered today? Pretty simple, huh? So, as I mentioned, we will move on to talking about other types of hard floor, how their gloss is restored in gyms and wood floors, and as well polished concrete floors. So that'll be on our Wednesday class. I'm going to end the recording, and then we'll just kind of wrap up.
Recording stopped.
Okay, so the class on Wednesday, I'm hoping we'll have everybody back in here so we can go into our breakout rooms. What I'm wanting you guys to do is to think about the type of buildings. And we mentioned our 3 types of buildings. We were going to do a medical building, okay? And what I'm looking at is I'm going to use for the sample that we're going to do, decided we're going to do a care home, a long-term care facility that has skilled nursing in it. Okay, and the reason we're doing that is because I wanted you guys to experience. You have to clean patient rooms. We have restrooms in there. You're going to have a cafeteria area. You should have some offices. You'll have some nursing stations. So that is going to be one. Is we're going to do a long-term care facility. Okay. The other we're going to do is an office building. And then the third is going to be a school. Okay. And a school will have classrooms. It will have a multi-purpose room. It will have offices. So again, a lot of similarities in these 3 buildings in that they're all going to have areas where you'll have office space, you'll have use, like in a school, it's classrooms. In a care facility, it is patient rooms. If you were doing an office building, it would be individual offices, right? What you're going to be doing as part of your final project, as teams, you're going to identify how you're going to clean this building. As we've already covered in the first lesson, above floors, and now as we've covered in hard floors, you're going to need to identify, based on the types of surfaces, what are the equipment I'm going to need, the equipment and tools. What are my materials, whether it's mop heads or vacuum bags or dusting cloths, dusting tools. What are those materials you're going to need? And then what are your chemicals, your supplies that you're going to need? And supplies will also include things like restroom supplies, garbage can liners. And then lastly, you'll identify the procedures. Now, what I don't want you guys to do is to recite every one of those, but I want you guys to figure out a way to show us in a presentation, here's the stuff we're going to need for doing this building. Here's what we're going to bring into the building. And here's our process. We're going to, do these things. And as we go through this, that's where we're going to change up a little bit. So part of Wednesday's class, over half of the class Wednesday and all of Friday, is going to be covering how we would do this, because we're halfway through this class as of Friday. Then when we come back from spring break and start talking about carpets and then restrooms, we'll bring it all the way there and we'll wrap up our whole building. How do I clean that building? Because every building is going to have restrooms in it. Every building is going to have some sort of carpet. Maybe it's not a lot, but it's going to have a variety of floors. Now, I'm going to help you guys out. You guys can cheat a little bit, because as a team, you can determine your floor surfaces, and hopefully you're starting to pay attention to some surfaces are easier to clean than others. An example is I personally would never have VCT in my facility because I don't want to have to use wax. So if I don't have to wax floors, it reduces my labor cost. Okay. So look at those things. That's going to be the process we're going to use. We'll get our teams together on Wednesday. We have Christina, who should be back in here with us Wednesday. Tony, let me ask you, I know you're out and about. Are you going to be in a position on Wednesday to be on video?
Yeah, I mean, I can access video, it looks like today on the computer that I'm using. So, yeah.
Okay. Um, more than anything, as you guys work in your break rooms, it's also an opportunity to get to know each other as a team. Um, we are down to 11 of us. Okay. Naomi had to drop out of this class. She's joining the next one. So there's 11 in the class. So it'll end up being 4, 4, and 3 as far as our teams. Okay. So, and I have to find my note as to how I broke everybody apart because I wrote it down the other day and I don't have it in front of me. So I'll make sure I have that for Wednesday. So, more than anything, review what we've covered. You are now enough that if you review the notes in the Google Classroom, okay, that presentation layout, you could go ahead and test on the hard floor session. So go ahead and you guys could start on that. One of the things I will be doing on Wednesday and Friday. Individuals who are behind on their testing, I'll go in and I'll want to meet with you privately in the breakout room. So I'll have a 4th breakout room where I can meet with some of the individuals to see what we need to do to help you guys get your testing current. Because I don't want to see a situation where we get to the end and you're having to do all your testing at the very end. So, all right. Thank you guys. We'll see you on Wednesday. And there's the only homework assignment is start your testing on module number 4. Thanks, guys. I'm sticking around if anybody needs me for any questions.
That's all.